Welcome to another deep dive.
Oh, yeah.
So this time we're going to be looking at the world of psychopathy and how it kind of touches upon all different sectors of society.
Yeah.
We've got some really
Well,
fascinating cases to get through,
yeah.
starting with a mysterious book
All right.
that's landed on the desks of various academics,
Oh, wow.
a reformed death squad leader who has a very interesting need to be liked.
Well, that's intriguing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A CEO who's a bit too fond of predatory animal sculptures.
Oh, my goodness.
And we might even unearth
Okay.
some unsettling truths about seemingly ordinary people.
Yeah, I think what's so captivating about psychopathy is how this condition that we often link with criminality, like truly evil behavior, pops up in the most unexpected corners of society.
It really does.
Yeah.
Like this book, for example, titled Being or Nothingness. I mean, this book's got blank pages,
Okay.
cut out words, cryptic verses, the whole 9 yards.
That sounds strange.
It really is.
Yeah.
There's no publishing information,
Wow.
no author's name, just instructions to study a letter addressed to Professor Douglas Hofstadter.
And is the letter
just
as perplexing?
It's just as strange as the book.
Wow.
Yeah, it hints at some larger project that, you know.
There's something more to this than just the book.
It's like, it's part of
It's like a puzzle.
a puzzle.
Yeah.
Like almost like it's a game or something.
Yeah, almost like it's meant to provoke thought or lead you down a particular path.
And then it gets even stranger because researchers have actually traced this book back to a Swedish psychiatrist and protein chemist named Petter Nordland.
Wow. What a combination.
Oh, really? That's so...
Quite an eclectic mix.
It's such a strange combination.
Yeah, it is.
But he translated the book, but refuses to divulge any details about the author, who's only referred to as Joe K.
Oh, Joe K.
Yeah.
Very mysterious.
It is very mysterious.
Yeah.
So it's almost as if he's orchestrating this grand psychopathy-themed scavenger hunt.
That's a good way to put it.
I know. This is so bizarre.
This mysterious book really begs the question, though.
Yeah.
What is it about psychopathy that continues to fascinate and intrigue us?
Well, I think before we go too far down the rabbit hole of this book, maybe we should take a step back and kind of define what we mean by psychopathy.
Good point.
You know?
Yeah, there are a lot of misconceptions that surround this condition.
Absolutely.
But luckily, the work of Dr. Bob Hare, who is kind of the leading expert on psychopathy, provides a framework for understanding it.
Yes.
His PCLR checklist has truly revolutionized how we identify and assess psychopathic traits.
The checklist, right? It outlines some pretty striking characteristics, like superficial charm, a grandiose sense of self-worth, a constant need for stimulation.
Yeah.
And then you get into, you know...
And then there's the...
pathological lying, manipulativeness, lack of remorse.
A lack of remorse.
A shallow affect.
A shallow affect.
And a callous disregard for others.
It's enough to make you wonder who you can trust.
I know.
Right. But the checklist isn't really meant to make us suspicious of everyone. It's meant to highlight the distinct emotional landscape of a psychopath.
Right.
I mean, consider this. Imagine witnessing a car crash.
Okay.
You'd probably feel this surge of fear, concern, empathy.
Yes.
But a psychopath wouldn't experience that same depth of emotional response.
Yeah. I remember one time I saw this minor fender bender, and even that left me a little shaken.
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine witnessing a serious accident and not having some kind of emotional reaction.
Right. Yeah. And that difference in emotional experience is really key to understanding how a psychopathy can manifest in unexpected ways.
Yes.
Particularly when those with these traits occupy positions of power.
Okay, so that brings us to our first case study.
Right.
Toto Constant, the former leader of FRAPH, a Haitian death squad responsible for some horrific acts.
Yeah.
Later, he was jailed not for those atrocities, but for mortgage fraud.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a very bizarre twist.
It is. It certainly challenges our preconceived notions of what a psychopath looks like.
Yeah.
I mean, here's a man accused of orchestrating violence.
Yeah.
Who later expresses this deep desire to be liked during interviews.
It's almost like he craves approval.
Right.
Like he needs to be seen in a positive light.
Exactly. And it raises the question, could this desire to be liked be a calculated tactic used by psychopaths to gain trust and ultimately power?
It's a disturbing thought.
It is.
And if we're talking about psychopaths, in positions of power, we can't ignore Al Dunlap.
Oh, yes, Al Dunlap.
The former CEO of Sunbeam.
Right, the chainsaw Al Dunlap.
Yeah,
Infamous for his ruthlessness.
Yeah, infamous for his cost-cutting measures and mass layoffs. I mean, Dunlap really
does.
epitomizes how psychopathic traits can be alluring in the corporate world.
They could be misinterpreted as strength, right, as strong leadership.
Exactly.
He had this lavish Florida mansion, adorned with sculptures of predatory animals, and grand self-portraits.
It's like he was almost as if he relished this image of ruthlessness.
It's like those sculptures were a celebration of his predatory business practices.
Exactly. And what's striking is his utter lack of remorse for the economic devastation he caused.
Like, for example, when he shut down the Sunbeam plant. Yes. In Shibuya, Alabama.
In Shibuya, Alabama.
Thousands lost their jobs.
Right. Their livelihoods were just shattered.
Yeah. Their whole lives were upended.
Right.
And Dunlap seemed completely unfazed.
It's like he saw people as pawns in his game.
Pawns in his game of corporate conquest.
Exactly.
And he even compared the town's destruction to a scene from Night of the Living Dead.
I know.
Which is just incredibly callous.
It's so callous.
It really is. And even when shown graphic crime scene photos, his reaction was more of detached curiosity than horror.
It's chilling.
Right? This emotional detachment.
Yeah.
This lack of empathy is often at the core of psychopathy.
It really is. And it makes you wonder
It does.
how someone like Dunlap could ascend to the helm of a major corporation.
And at the time, Wall Street praised Dunlap's cost-cutting measures.
Yeah.
They saw it as...
a Goldman Sachs report even lauded his actions, predicted higher earnings for Sunbeam.
So Dunlap's case really demonstrates how a laser focus on profits, even at the expense of human well-being, can be mistaken for effective leadership in certain corporate contexts.
It's like the allure of financial success blinded people.
It did.
To the human cost of Dunlap's actions.
It raises a crucial question. What are the values driving certain sectors of society where such behavior is not only tolerated, but rewarded?
Yeah, it's a big question.
It is.
So we've seen how psychopathy can appear in the realms of crime and the corporate world.
Yeah.
But our next story takes us into the realm of mental illness. Exploring those blurry lines.
Yeah, this is where the conversation gets really interesting.
It really does.
Because we're going to unpack the complexities of diagnoses and the potential for misjudging even the most extreme behaviors. So this story centers around a young man named Tony. Who, to avoid prison, decided to fake insanity.
Wow.
His plan was to land a cushy stay in a county hospital.
Okay.
But things didn't quite go as planned.
So instead of
a comfortable hospital stay, Tony found himself in Broadmoor, which is a high-security psychiatric hospital, housing some of the most notorious criminals in the UK.
Talk about a gamble gone wrong.
Talk about a gamble gone wrong.
I know.
He essentially spent his youth confined in this high-security facility, surrounded by people who had committed truly heinous crimes.
So Tony's story really underscores how complex mental illness can be.
It does.
And how the lines between deliberate deception and genuine psychopathy can become incredibly murky.
It's really murky.
Yeah.
And it compels us to ask, how do we accurately diagnose and treat individuals when the very nature of their condition involves manipulation and deceit?
It's such a tough question.
It is.
And it really emphasizes the expertise of these mental health professionals.
It does, because
even then,
even then, misinterpretations can occur.
Exactly. And this leads us to another critical point, how we, particularly the media, portray and potentially exploit mental illness.
And speaking of media, we met Charlotte, a former TV guest booker for shows like Jerry Springer and Jeremy Kyle.
Where drama
and conflict
were the main draw.
Yeah.
And Charlotte had a knack.
She did.
For identifying guests with what she called...
What did she call it?
The right sort of madness.
The right sort of madness.
Medicated, but still volatile enough.
Wow.
To guarantee captivating television.
So she had a system. Antidepressants.
Okay.
Green light.
Okay.
Lithium.
Okay.
Too risky.
Oh, wow.
Might make them too subdued.
It's a chilling example.
It is.
Of how entertainment can exploit.
And misrepresent.
Mental illness.
Yeah, and it really makes you think.
It does.
About how desensitized we can become to human suffering when it's presented as entertainment.
Yeah.
This desensitization can extend to
other professions.
Professions where encountering human suffering is common.
Like law enforcement, healthcare, even journalism.
You're constantly exposed to these extreme situations.
Yeah.
And it can
change you.
It can change you.
So we have a mysterious book.
Okay.
A death squad leader. A ruthless CEO.
Right.
A young man who faked his way into a high-security psychiatric hospital.
Right.
And a TV guest booker with a disconcerting talent for spotting the right sort of madness.
The right sort of madness.
Where do we go from here?
Well, let's delve into the world of espionage
and
whistleblowing, where we encounter a descent into madness that captivated the media.
Okay.
The story of David Shaler.
David Shaler.
A former MI5 officer who went from exposing government secrets to declaring himself the Messiah.
Okay, so Shaler's case is fascinating because it highlights how the media can be captivated by certain types of madness.
Right.
While others remain hidden.
Yeah, remember Charlotte's right sort of madness?
Yeah.
Shaler's story fits that mold perfectly.
It does.
He starts as a whistleblower.
Okay.
Exposing what he believed to be illegal activities within MI6. He goes public, ends up on the run, and eventually serves time in prison.
Yeah.
But that was just the beginning.
Okay.
After prison, he gets involved with the July 7th Truth Movement, which questions the official narrative of London bombings.
Okay.
And initially, his claims are somewhat measured.
Right.
But then they take a sharp turn towards conspiracy theories.
So he starts claiming
the bombings were staged, that they never actually happened. And from there, his theories spiral.
Okay.
He even claims no planes were involved in the 9/11 attacks.
Okay.
Alleging they were missiles disguised as planes using holograms.
Wow. And the media
lapped it up.
They did.
His increasingly bizarre theories turned into a media sensation.
Yeah.
Amplifying his platform, spreading his beliefs.
So his descent into what seemed like madness became a form of entertainment.
It did.
Right.
And then he declared himself the Messiah.
At that point, you'd think the media would back off.
You would think.
Right.
Recognizing a man struggling.
With his mental health?
Yeah. But while some outlets expressed concern, others continued to give him a platform.
Really?
Seemingly unable to resist the spectacle.
It's like a train wreck you couldn't look away from.
It is.
But it raises serious ethical questions.
It does.
About how we cover mental illness.
Right. Does our fascination with the sensational overshadow the need for compassion?
Yes.
And understanding.
Okay, so Shaler's case underscores the power of labels.
It does.
And how they shape public perception, which kind of paves the way for our next topic. The impact of labeling and the rise of overdiagnosis in mental health.
This is a huge issue.
It's a huge issue, and we're going to explore the DSM.
Okay, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
Right. And how its evolution has contributed to an explosion of new mental disorders.
Central to this discussion is the work of Dr. Robert Spitzer.
Dr. Robert Spitzer.
The architect of DSM-3. Now, his aim was to introduce scientific rigor into mental illness diagnoses. But he inadvertently contributed to the potential for overdiagnosis.
Because as newer editions...
as the DSM came out...
evolved, it became thicker. And thicker.
And thicker.
With more and more conditions.
More and more conditions being added.
Added to the list.
Yeah, and this raises the concern of pathologizing normal human behaviors.
Right.
Especially in children.
Right.
And a prime example of this is the rise of childhood bipolar disorder.
Right.
Which is fascinating because it's a condition typically associated with adults.
Right.
Right. And yet it's been increasingly applied to children.
Right.
Leading to this surge in diagnoses.
Yeah.
And the use of strong psychiatric medications.
Yeah. So we'll learn about Bryna Habert and her son, Matt, who was diagnosed with childhood bipolar disorder at a young age.
Yeah.
And their story really illustrates the complexities of navigating this landscape. And the need for careful consideration when labeling a child with such a serious mental illness.
Absolutely. We can't just assume.
We can't.
That every challenging behavior is a sign of mental illness.
Right.
We have to consider the complexities of human development.
Yes.
Individual differences.
Right.
Environmental factors.
Right.
There's a whole interplay of elements at work.
Absolutely.
So we've gone from a mysterious book.
I know this has been
to a death squad leader.
Yeah.
To a ruthless CEO.
I know.
To faked mental illness.
A lot.
To a whistleblowing messiah.
Yeah.
To the intricacies of psychiatric diagnosis.
Quite a journey.
Quite a journey indeed.
And all in what, like
40 minutes? But threading through it all is this central theme.
Okay.
The nature of psychopathy and its unexpected connections to various facets of society.
So now we're going to challenge this notion.
Challenge the notion.
That psychopathy is a black and white concept.
Right. It's not as simple as
you are or you aren't.
You are or you aren't a psychopath.
Right.
Instead, we need to consider the spectrum.
The spectrum.
Of traits involved.
Right.
Right. Acknowledging that some of these characteristics might even be advantageous in certain situations.
And this idea was actually brought up by Tony. The young man who faked his way into Broadmoor.
Yeah.
After years of therapy, he observed that everyone is a bit psychopathic.
It's a thought-provoking statement.
It is.
That challenges our assumptions about psychopathy.
Yeah.
Right? Could it be that we all possess some of these traits to varying degrees?
It's a fascinating question.
It is, indeed. And that's precisely what we'll explore next.
Okay.
We'll delve into the subtleties of psychopathy and how these traits can manifest in everyday life.
And consider the ethical implications of labeling individuals as psychopaths.
Because a label can be both a tool for understanding and a weapon of prejudice.
Absolutely.
So remember, a diagnosis should never be used to dehumanize or dismiss someone.
It's about understanding.
It's about understanding the complexities of the human experience.
And that brings us to our next story.
Okay.
A controversial case highlighting the dangers of leaning too heavily on psychological profiling, particularly in criminal investigations.
Yeah, this is the story.
This is the story.
Of Colin Stagg.
Colin Stagg.
Wrongly accused of murder.
Wow.
Based on a flawed psychological profile. Created by Paul Britton.
Okay, so we've got this brutal murder.
We do.
In 1992.
Right, Rachel Nicholl.
Rachel Nicholl.
Brutally murdered on Wimbledon Common. In London.
And the police.
The crime horrified the nation.
It did.
And the police were under immense pressure.
To find the killer.
To find your killer.
So desperate for a breakthrough.
Yeah.
They enlist Paul Britton.
Paul Britton, a renowned criminal profiler. To help at the investigation.
Okay, and Britton reviews.
Yeah.
The case files, the crime scene, constructs a profile of the killer.
And he believes
the perpetrator
is a sexual psychopath.
A sexual psychopath.
A loner living near Wimbledon Common. With a collection of violent pornography. So profiling, when used responsibly, could be a valuable tool for narrowing down suspects. So this seemed like a reasonable approach. But this is where things took a wrong turn.
Okay.
Because Britton's profile included very specific details about the killer's sexual preferences that didn't actually match the crime scene evidence.
Wow.
It was as if he was shaping the profile to fit a particular suspect.
And that suspect was?
Colin Stagg.
Colin Stagg.
Who was a bit of an outsider. A loner who lived near Wimbledon Common.
Near Wimbledon Common.
And had some unusual sexual interests.
Okay, so on paper?
On paper.
He fit certain aspects.
He fit certain aspects.
Of Britton's profile.
Of Britton's profile.
But there was no concrete evidence.
There was no concrete evidence.
Linking him to the crime.
Linking him to the crime.
But the police convinced they had their man devised a plan.
They devised a plan.
To extract a confession from him.
To get him to confess.
And this is where we get.
The
honey trap.
A honey trap.
Right.
They recruit an undercover policewoman.
Oh, wow.
To contact Stagg.
Okay.
Posing as a woman interested in his specific sexual fantasies.
Wow.
The aim was to manipulate him.
Wow.
Into revealing incriminating information.
Okay.
Or even confessing to the murder.
And this was all before he was even charged with a crime.
He was merely a suspect.
Wow.
Based on this flawed psychological profile.
That's unbelievable.
It's a risky and ethically questionable tactic.
Absolutely. So the undercover policewoman, using the alias Lizzie James, contacts Stagg through a Lonely Hearts advertisement and plays the role of a woman who's intrigued by his unusual interests.
Yes, encouraging him to open up about his fantasies and to further prod him. Lizzie James fabricates a story about her own past, claiming to have participated in ritualistic killings.
Wow.
It was a calculated attempt
to exploit his vulnerabilities.
And elicit a confession.
Right, and Stagg. Eager to impress
Lizzie James.
Right.
And perhaps even experience intimacy with her.
Yeah.
Goes along with this charade.
So he
writes letters.
Writing letters.
Detailing his fantasies, some of which include violent and disturbing imagery. But he consistently maintains that these are just fantasies, not reflections of his real-life actions.
But the police convinced of Stagg's guilt.
Right. They see what they want to see, disregarding the fact that Stagg never actually admitted to any involvement in the murder.
Wow. So after months of this manipulative exchange, Stagg is arrested and charged with Rachel Nichols' murder.
Wow.
And of course, the case
becomes
a media sensation.
With
Stagg portrayed as this monstrous figure.
Based on his letters.
And
Britton's psychological profile.
Right. But as the case proceeds to trial,
the prosecution's narrative begins to unravel.
So the judge, upon reviewing the evidence, starts to grow increasingly skeptical of the methods used to obtain of Stagg's supposed confession.
He was particularly critical of Britton's involvement, questioning the validity of his psychological profile and the ethical implications of the honey trap.
Right.
So the judge ultimately ruled that the evidence against Stagg was inadmissible.
Wow.
And the case was dismissed.
So Colin Stagg
walked free.
Walks free.
But his
reputation had been irrevocably tarnished.
Tarnished by this whole ordeal.
By the ordeal.
Wow. And the case had
significant repercussions
from
the field of criminal profiling.
Right.
It raised serious concerns about its potential for misuse and the urgent need for ethical guidelines.
So the Colin Stagg case really serves as a stark reminder.
It does. Traditions and biases.
And biases can have devastating consequences. Especially when they're used to justify. Manipulative tactics. And erode individual rights.
Absolutely. And it underscores the importance
of critical thinking. Right. Of questioning even
the most respected authorities.
And holding those in positions of power accountable for their actions.
Yeah, it's so important that we do that.
So the Stagg case had a profound impact.
It did.
On Paul Britton's career.
Oh, really?
His reputation suffered.
Right.
And he faced criticism.
Right.
From both within and outside. The field of criminal profiling.
So did he stop working?
He continued working. As a forensic psychologist.
Okay.
But with a much more cautious approach.
I would imagine so.
To profiling.
Right.
Recognizing the potential for misinterpreting evidence.
Right.
And the need for ethical boundaries.
So he kind of became an advocate.
He did. He became an advocate.
For those ethical guidelines.
For ethical guidelines in criminal profiling.
So at least something good.
Something good came out of this. Acknowledging the necessity for safeguards to prevent similar abuses from happening again.
So while this case was a tragedy.
It was a tragedy.
For Rachel Nichols and her family.
For Rachel Nichols.
It did prompt some positive changes.
It did.
Within the field?
Within the field of criminal profiling.
Criminal profiling.
Yeah, and it serves as a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Reminding us that even with good intentions,
right,
things can go terribly wrong when we allow biases
and assumptions.
To cloud our judgment.
I'm still left wondering, though, is there a place for profiling?
That's a good question.
In criminal investigations?
Yeah, is there a place for it?
Can it be a useful tool when used?
Yeah, can it be used responsibly?
Responsibly and ethically?
Responsibly and ethically, that's a complex question.
It is a tough one.
That continues to be debated.
I think we can all agree that the Colin Stagg case underscores the need.
The need for caution.
For caution.
For clear ethical guidelines.
Right.
And for a healthy dose of skepticism.
Absolutely.
When it comes to psychological profiling.
Okay, so we've explored the dark side.
Yeah, we've looked at
criminal profiling,
the dangers of flawed assumptions, and the crucial role of ethical considerations.
Right, but our exploration of psychopathy wouldn't be complete without revisiting the DSM.
The DSM.
That ever-evolving catalog.
The ever-evolving catalog of mental disorders.
Mental disorders.
The DSM has been instrumental.
It has.
In shaping our understanding of mental illness.
Right.
But it remains a source of much debate and controversy.
Particularly when it comes to the inclusion of new conditions.
Yes, the broadening of diagnostic criteria.
And the concern of overdiagnosis.
The concern of overdiagnosis, exactly.
Right. And remember Dr. Robert Spitzer.
Dr. Robert Spitzer, the architect of DSM-3.
The architect of DSM-3.
His intention was to inject more scientific rigor into the process of diagnosing mental illness. But his efforts inadvertently contributed to an unintended consequence.
What was that?
The pathologizing of normal human behavior.
Right.
The idea that everyday struggles.
Right, quirks.
Quirks, even personality traits.
Yeah.
Are being medicalized.
Right.
And categorized as mental disorders.
Yeah, and this trend has fueled concerns.
It has.
About the overuse of medication, the stigma.
The stigma.
Associated with mental illness.
Associated with mental illness.
And the potential for misdiagnosis.
And the potential for misdiagnosis, absolutely.
And a prime example of this.
A prime example.
Is the rise of childhood bipolar disorder.
Yes. What was once primarily diagnosed in adults is now a common diagnosis.
In children.
Leading to a surge in the prescription of powerful antipsychotics to very young children.
And this trend has been driven.
This trend has been driven in part
by big pharma.
By the pharmaceutical industry, which has a vested interest in expanding the market for its products.
So there's also been a push from certain advocacy groups.
There has.
Some funded by the pharmaceutical industry.
Some funded by the pharmaceutical industry.
To raise awareness. Of childhood bipolar disorder. And encourage earlier diagnosis.
But
this has led to concerns.
Right, rightfully so.
About overdiagnosis.
And the potential harm.
Of
exposing children.
To
unnecessary medication. And the stigma.
Of a serious mental illness label.
And it's important to acknowledge. That not all experts agree with the diagnosis of childhood bipolar disorder.
So some believe these children.
Are being misdiagnosed.
Okay.
That their behaviors are better explained by other conditions like ADHD or anxiety disorders.
Right. So we're kind of in this murky territory.
We are.
Where the lines between normal behavior and mental illness are becoming increasingly blurred.
How do we define mental illness?
That's the question.
Who benefits from these diagnoses? What are the potential consequences of overdiagnosis and overmedication?
So let's kind of delve into this world.
Let's delve into the world of the DSM.
And
explore its evolution. The controversies.
It
has sparked. And its impact on our understanding of mental illness.
Okay, so we'll kind of trace its history.
We'll trace its history from its early editions to its current iteration. Examining how the inclusion of new disorders and the expansion of diagnostic criteria have fueled anxieties about overdiagnosis.
And we'll hear from experts.
We will.
On both sides of the debate.
Presenting
different perspectives on the DSM's strengths and weaknesses.
It's a complex.
It is a complex and often contentious issue.
It really is.
But crucial for understanding
the
evolving landscape of mental health. and the challenges we face in diagnosing and treating mental illness responsibly.
So let's go back.
Let's go back
to the early days of the DSM.
The DSM.
The first edition, published in 1952, was a relatively slim volume containing a limited number of mental disorders. And it was heavily influenced by psychoanalytic theory, reflecting the prevailing school of thought in psychiatry at that time. But as the field of psychiatry advanced, so too did the DSM. The second edition, published in 1968, expanded the list of disorders and attempted to adopt a more descriptive approach.
But however,
both DSM-I and DSM-2.
Both DSM-I and DSM-2 were criticized for their lack of scientific rigor.
And their reliance on subjective interpretation of symptoms.
So very much very much open to...
open to interpretation.
Interpretation and bias. And that brings us to a pivotal moment in the DSM's history.
What's that?
The publication of DSM-3 in 1980. Spearheaded by Dr. Robert Spitzer.
Dr. Robert Spitzer.
And Spitzer's goal was to revolutionize the way we diagnose mental illness by bringing greater objectivity and scientific evidence to the process.
So he wanted to move away.
He wanted to move away
from the vague language.
From that vague language of psychoanalysis. And create a more reliable and reproducible system.
So how did he do that?
So to achieve this, he introduced a radical new approach. The use of checklists. And specific criteria to define each mental disorder.
So instead of relying on therapists' subjective
interpretations of their patient's symptoms.
The DSM-3 provided a clear set of criteria that could be applied consistently to make a diagnosis. So this marked a significant shift in the field of psychiatry. It profoundly impacted how we understand and treat mental illness.
But it also laid the groundwork.
It did.
For this explosion of new mental disorders.
And the expansion.
And the expansion of diagnostic criteria. That we see in later editions of the DSM.
Despite the success of DSM-3, Spitzer remained somewhat dissatisfied.
Really?
He felt certain diagnostic criteria remained too vague, susceptible to differing interpretations, which could lead to inconsistencies in diagnoses.
So he sets out to create an even more comprehensive
and precise manual.
And this becomes
DSM-IV.
DSM-IV published in 1994. And this is a massive volume.
It's a massive volume.
Listing over 300 mental disorders.
Over 300.
Each meticulously defined. With specific criteria. And this edition really solidified the shift toward a more biological, medicalized understanding of mental illness. But as the DSM became increasingly comprehensive, so too did concerns about overdiagnosis. And the potential for pathologizing normal human experiences.
Critics are arguing that the DSM...
Critics argued that the DSM was turning everyday struggles, quirks, and even personality traits into medical conditions, fueling an over-reliance on medication.
And the stigma associated with mental illness.
And
these concerns only intensified.
It did with the publication of DSM-5 in 2013.
DSM-5.
Which further broadened the list of disorders.
It broadened the list of disorders.
And expanded the diagnostic criteria. For many existing conditions.
And DSM-5 ignited a firestorm of controversy with prominent psychiatrists and psychologists denouncing what they perceived as the medicalization of everyday life.
And this debate continues today.
It does.
With strong opinions. On both sides of the issue.
So where do we go from here?
Where do we go?
Is the DSM a valuable tool for understanding and treating mental illness? Or is it a potentially harmful instrument that's pathologizing normal human behavior and contributing to a culture of overdiagnosis?
That's the question.
It is a complex issue.
It is.
Perhaps the DSM, with its constant evolution, reflects our evolving understanding. of the human mind.
Right.
Maybe it's a work in progress.
Right.
That continues to be refined as we delve deeper into the intricacies of mental health.
And the human mind.
And the human mind. But it's crucial that we engage in this ongoing dialogue.
Yeah.
That we challenge assumptions. That we demand accountability. And that we prioritize
the
well-being of individuals over the potential profits of the pharmaceutical industry.
Because
ultimately our goal should be to provide help
to those who are struggling.
To those who are truly struggling with mental illness. Right. While avoiding the potential harm that can come from overdiagnosis and overmedication. Right. It requires a balanced and nuanced approach. Recognizing the complexities of human experience and the limitations of our current understanding of the human mind.
Okay, so now let's circle back.
Okay.
To that enigmatic book.
Yes. Being or Nothingness.
Being or Nothingness.
Its mysterious author.
And Petter Nordland.
Petter Nordland.
So remember
Nordland sent you a copy.
He did.
Of the book after your interactions with individuals.
It's like all these different individuals.
Who exhibited psychopathic traits.
Right. Like, it was almost like he was prompting me to see the world through a different lens.
Right. To consider the possibility that psychopathy exists on a spectrum. And maybe even confront those aspects within yourself.
Within myself, exactly.
His email explaining the significance of the book's 42 pages.
Right.
21 with text.
And 21 blank.
And 21 blank.
Symbolized.
Highlighted the duality of being or nothingness.
Right. And this
concept is not just about existential philosophy, but perhaps also about understanding
the human condition.
The human condition.
Including psychopathy.
Including psychopathy.
So maybe being or nothingness is more than a puzzle to be solved.
Maybe it's a philosophical exploration of the human psyche.
Right. The capacity.
The capacity for both good and evil.
Right.
That resides within us all.
Right. And the choice ultimately.
The choice ultimately
lies with each of us.
With each of us.
Yeah.
To determine which path we choose to follow.
So as we conclude.
This
deep dive, I want to thank you, our listeners, for joining us.
Thank you for joining us.
On this journey.
We've
covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Exploring the intricacies of psychopathy. Challenging conventional narratives. And delving into the ethical considerations. That surround this complex topic.
We've learned. That psychopathy isn't a simple label, a black and white categorization of good versus evil. It's a spectrum of traits.
It's a spectrum
that exists within all of us.
Yes.
To varying degrees.
And perhaps the real takeaway.
Yeah, what is the real takeaway?
From this exploration. Isn't about fearing those who exhibit psychopathic traits.
Right.
But rather about understanding them. About recognizing the shared humanity. That connects us all. And about making conscious choices. That reflect our values. And our commitment to creating a more compassionate world.
Absolutely.
So as you continue on your own journey of discovery.
Yes, as you continue on your journey.
Remember to approach the world with an open mind. A discerning eye. And a compassionate heart.
Question assumptions.
Question those assumptions.
Challenge narratives.
Challenge the narratives.
And always strive.
For deeper understanding. And who knows, maybe one day.
You'll find yourself face to face.
With the enigmatic
Petter Nordland. And his being or nothingness. Ready to embark. On your own deep dive.
Into the mysteries.
Of
the human psyche.
You
know, it seems like every path we've explored in this deep dive keeps leading back to Petter Nordland and his enigmatic book, Being or Nothingness.
Yeah, it's almost like...
It's like he anticipated our journey.
Yeah, like he's dropping these breadcrumbs along the way.
Yeah.
To guide us
toward...
For the deeper understanding of psychopathy.
It's like he's challenging us to look beyond the surface.
Yeah.
To confront the uncomfortable realities of the human condition and the spectrum of behaviors that kind of fall under the umbrella.
That fall under that umbrella of normal. And perhaps in doing so, he's encouraging us to question our own assumptions.
About
what constitutes good and evil.
Good and evil.
Sane and insane.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is.
But isn't that the essence of a deep dive?
I think it is.
Right.
It's about
pushing beyond the headline.
Pushing beyond the headlines, delving into the nuances and complexities of a topic, and emerging with more questions than answers.
With more questions than answers.
And in the case of psychopathy, it's about recognizing that these traits exist within all of us to varying degrees.
Right.
The question isn't whether we possess them.
Right.
It's how they manifest in our lives and the choices we make as a result.
And that brings us back to, I think, the central theme.
It does.
That seems to be woven throughout this entire exploration.
Yeah, what is that?
The duality of human nature.
Yeah, the capacity for both.
Yeah.
Incredible compassion.
Incredible compassion.
And unthinkable cruelty.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is. And perhaps Nordland's being or nothingness is a reflection of that duality.
Right.
A reminder that we all contain within us the potential for both creation and destruction.
Right.
The choice ultimately lies with each of us.
It does.
To determine which path we choose to follow.
And on that note, as we conclude this deep dive, I want to thank you, our listeners.
Yes.
For joining us on this journey.
On this journey.
We've covered a lot of ground exploring the intricacies of psychopathy. Challenging conventional narratives. Delving into the ethical considerations.
Those ethical considerations that surround this topic.
That's around this very complex topic.
And we have
learned
that psychopathy isn't a simple label.
Right.
Not a black and white categorization of good versus evil.
It's a spectrum.
It's a spectrum of traits.
Traits.
That exist within all of us.
Right.
To varying degrees.
To varying degrees. And I think the real takeaway for me is that it's not about fearing those who exhibit psychopathic traits. It's about understanding.
It's about understanding.
Understanding.
Yeah. Recognizing the shared humanity.
That connects us all.
That connects us all.
And making conscious choices that reflect our values.
Yes, conscious choices.
Our values and our commitment to creating
a
more compassionate world.
A more compassionate world, absolutely.
So as you continue on your own journey of discovery. Remember to approach the world. With an open mind.
A
discerning eye. And a compassionate heart.
A compassionate heart. Question assumptions.
Question those assumptions. Challenge those narratives.
And
always
strive.
Strive for deeper understanding. And who knows? You might one day find yourself face to face. With the enigmatic Petter Nordland. And his being or nothingness.
And his book, Being or Nothingness.
You can embark on your own deep dive. Into the mysteries of the human psyche.